Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another video, and today I'm just going to be doing an introduction to arcade PCBs, collecting, Jamma, all that good stuff, just as an introduction video for anyone that wants to get into it. I know when I first started arcade PCB collecting and all that stuff, I wanted a video like this that I'm about to make, so I think this will be good for anyone who's trying to get into it. And hopefully it answers some questions, and maybe you're just interested in it, or maybe you already know all this information, you just want to watch a video that's related to arcade PCBs, but that's fine. But anyway, before I start, I just wanted to mention this Pi 1964 here. Appreciate all the new subscribers and people who commented on the video, and I will be making a follow-up video on it, where I restore it, and hopefully it's gonna turn out pretty good. It all looks like it's original parts, so it should be a good video and it should restore quite nicely. And in the meantime, you can just see it on the left here. There's another 60s television. It's a 1967 Station Master. It's also a dual standard set, and I'll also be restoring that as well in a video, so that'll probably be the next video I do, I think. But yeah, stay tuned for that one as well. Also, excuse the mess, it's a bit messy in here, I'm kind of sorting stuff out. And yeah, so let's get on with it. So how do arcade cabinets work? That's a question I had when I first started. I was just sort of curious how they all hook up and work. I have one here. This is just a standard sort of generic Jamma cabinet from the late 90s, I think from 1998. And we'll talk about Jamma in a second, but basically you would just have a board like this. This is the first arcade PCB I purchased, and this one, for example, you'd have legs like this. These are standoffs, and you just screw. Usually the board would be mounted on the side, inside, or on like a little shelf or something, and you'd have an edge connector, and usually it's just one edge connector like this, and it would go off with a big harness like this, and it would go off to the cabinet and to the controls, to the monitor and all that jazz. That's basically how it hooks up usually. But anyway, let's talk about Jamma. So Jamma was introduced, I believe, in 1985, or was it 87? I think it was 85. And Jamma is basically a standard. A lot of arcade companies got together and decided to make a standard. Basically a standard pinout for the edge connector, which basically meant that it was a lot easier for people to swap out boards. You could use a cabinet and just swap out a board and not have to worry about all the pinout and everything like that. So it's just a standard pinout, standard voltages. They're all the same with Jamma, and you can probably see it a little bit. It actually says Jamma as well, right above the edge connector, and it's also got a notch in it as well, so you don't plug it in the wrong way. And also, this is the power part of the edge connector, the little shorter part. And yeah, most arcade boards you'll find will be Jamma, from late 80s to mid 90s. And yeah, this is a Jamma board. This is Rastan Saga. This is the first one I purchased. And typically, if you want to play something like this without an arcade cabinet, such as the one behind me, you'll need something like a Supergun. This is a Supergun here. This is the RGB. This is the Supergun minigun. There we go. This is an open source one. I actually purchased this pre-built. It's got a 3D printed case, but you can make one yourself. And basically, this is sort of like an interface. This is sort of acting as the arcade cabinet. So typically, you got your board here, and you would plug it in like this, and there you go. And this basically, like I said, acts as the cabinet. So for Jamma and for a lot of boards, how it works is you'll have your power coming in this connector. Basically, you'll have in and out on this connector, stuff coming in, stuff coming out. So you'll have power coming in, the coin door, coin mech, you'll have that coming in. You'll have the controls, the signal for that coming in. And you'll have stuff like audio and video coming out, of the connector. So, and yeah, this acts as an interface. So basically, you have your controller ports, you have your insert coin button and your service button, because some arcade boards need a separate button. And you've got your audio video out. You've got your I think that's separate audio. I can't remember. 3.5mm. You've got your kick harness input, which we'll talk about a little later. Got power input. So Supergun is a way to play your arcade games, your arcade boards on a different monitor, or hook it up to like a scaler or something. That's how you would do it, and you would use something like this. This is a Neo Geo AES controller. I've changed the buttons and the little ball top, but yeah, this is a Neo Geo AES controller, and this is typical because Superguns use a Neo Geo style input, typically anyway. Sometimes it's Sega Saturn, but usually it's Neo Geo. So you'll have to get an adapter if you want to use a different controller, or just get a Neo Geo pad like this. This is okay for me because I don't really have any fighting games or any 6-button games, so 3 buttons, well 4 buttons in this case, is enough for me. And it's a great controller as well. So along with a Supergun, you will need something which is a power supply. Now this one's been taped up. This is just for safety. I've just taped it up there. It's actually coming apart. I need to reattach it. But this is a Suzo Hap power supply, as you can see there. And this is a very common one. You'll find this a lot, and it's quite cheap. I think £20, £30, I can't remember, but it's fairly cheap. And you'll need one of these, obviously, to power the board. And this one has a connector, this sort of 6-pin connector, which plugs in the side of the Supergun. And of course, Superguns will all be different, keep that in mind. But they will, for Jamma, they will use, plus 5 volts, minus 5, and plus 12 volts. As it says, you can sort of see it. That's what Jamma uses, the voltages. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind, I'll probably say that a lot, but one thing you have to keep in mind is you can get Chinese versions of this power supply, and it looks very similar, almost identical. And I think they sell them on Amazon as well. You want to avoid them because a lot of the time they will say plus 12 volts, and it will be populated, and it will be there, but they won't actually supply plus 12. The reason for that is because around 80% of boards, like the majority of Jamma boards, don't actually need the plus 12 volts, so they will only need the minus and plus 5 volts. The plus 12 volts is used only on some boards, and it's used for audio. Now the funny thing is, and it's actually a good thing, the first board I got, which is, as I said, Rastan Saga, needs the plus 12 volts for audio. And that's a good thing because I sort of learned about that. And a lot of people, sometimes they get a power supply that doesn't have plus 12, and then later down the line they'll find a board like this that needs it, and they'll have to buy another one. So I'd recommend just starting off with a power supply that has plus 12, so you don't have to run into that problem. And yeah, Rastan Saga is one of those games that needs the plus 12 for audio. And that's the reason Superguns use Jamma, is just because it's the most popular standard. So you can play other games, other arcade boards that don't use Jamma, and all you'll need is like an adapter usually. I think I have one somewhere. Here we are. This is an adapter. This is for Sega System 16. It actually has a list of the games that it supports. But basically, this is just an adapter. So this is Jamma. This side, you plug that into your Supergun or your cabinet, and then you'll plug the Sega System 16 board in the other end, and it just converts it to Jamma basically. So if you are looking for games that aren't Jamma, you can convert them. Just search around for like an adapter like this. This is a really good one actually. Or you could make your own, I guess, but I would recommend just buying a pre-made board. Also with the power supplies, you will notice, and this is common, there's a little sort of potentiometer at the top which you can adjust. Now that's for the 5 volts. Now the 5 volts tends to drift a bit, and if the 5 volts isn't accurate, and some arcade boards are more hungry and they want a bit more than 5 volts, not up to 6 volts but just a bit more, or some like just spot on 5 volts, and you will have to adjust it per board usually. And on a Supergun, typically you'll have a little digital sort of voltmeter display, so you can adjust it to be bang on 5 volts or whatever the board needs basically. So yeah, some boards from the early 90s, typically stuff like Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat, the fighting games, will use a kick harness, and that's because, well, I believe it's because Jamma only supports basically 3 buttons or 4 buttons, and the kick harness is basically to add the kick buttons, the extra 3 buttons. And on a Supergun you'll have an extra connector. On this one it's sort of, you can see that sort of white connector in there, that's for the kick harness. So, and on the arcade board, I don't have one to show you, but on the arcade board it would have an extra edge connector somewhere else, and you would hook up a kick harness to that and then hook it up to the Supergun separately, and that would give you the extra buttons, which are typically the kick buttons, which is why it's called a kick harness. So another thing is Superguns. Some of the earlier ones can be a little dangerous or a little sketchy. I believe it's the voltages on the sync line, or it might just be the voltages in general for the video output, but they tend to be quite high on, or at least TTL sync or something like that, on some of the earlier Jamma Superguns. So you want to be careful. Make sure you've got one that's got regular sort of attenuated correct voltages on the output. This one is safe. Usually the ones you find nowadays are fine, but the earlier ones can be a bit sketchy. You can plug them into an OSSC. I've heard stories of people frying their OSSCs and monitors and stuff like that, but just do the research and try and find one that that's known to be good. Like I said, this one's an open source one, so you can just buy the parts and make this yourself. And it uses a uses an 8-pin DIN connector. It's the same sort of connector that the NES RGB uses. And another thing which I showed before is this, which is a harness. So this is just basically, this is sort of what you'd find in a cabinet. You'd find this end where you plug your board in, and then this goes off to the cabinet and the various parts. And you can just get one of these as an extension cable essentially, or some Superguns you'll probably need it. So for example, there we go. So I can plug the Supergun in there, and then I can have the arcade board somewhere else. It doesn't have to be tethered directly to the Supergun. So this is quite useful, one of these. Again, you can make one yourself. I would not recommend it because there's a lot of wires. So I wouldn't recommend making one yourself, but you can. Okay, so let's talk about collecting and sort of storage of PCBs. So I'll show you my collection and how I store them. So this is my box of Resident Saga. Now, a lot of people do this, but you can do it any way you want. But the way I store them is in a box like this, and this one's a bit of a flimsy box, admittedly. I'd probably get some stronger ones, some double layered ones, but this one's cool because it opens up like this, and I can just put the board in, take it out easily, rather than open it from the side. So that's the way I've done it. So I've just I've just put a label on both sides, so it doesn't matter which way I've got it. And yeah, I just store my boards in like that. So Rastan Saga, I've already showed you that one. Good game, by the way. Good game. It's also called Rastan outside of Europe and Japan, I believe. I think in America it's called Rastan. But that's a good game. But that's how I store my boards. So, and that is the first one I purchased. So moving on. So we've got Altered Beast. Great game. Love Altered Beast. I know a lot of people don't. It's sort of like, I think a lot of people don't like it because it's hard, but I love Altered Beast. In fact, the Sega arcade games from the late 80s are my favourite, so the Sega System 16 games. So Altered Beast is no exception. Great game. I'll show you the board real quick. So this is the Altered Beast board. This is what a Sega System 16 board looks like. You got the Sega logo there with a serial number, and this bottom bit's the motherboard, basically. It's sort of like a console in a way. That's the motherboard, and you've got the ROM board on top for the game. You can interchange these if you want, if you make a modification to the board, because they are locked. They're locked to the ROM board they come with, but you can, with modification, make it so you can just put any board you want on. And something to note with the Sega System 16 boards, this is a good example of non-Jamma, so this is not Jamma. And you need one of these adapters, so you'd plug that on here. And then you can plug it into Jamma. Another thing about Sega System 16 boards, I don't want to talk about it too much, but just for anyone who's curious, or maybe wants a Sega board. One thing you have to keep in mind, not with this one, this is actually a really nice one, but a lot of them, the CPU will be a big Hitachi chip, like a really big Hitachi custom CPU, and it basically has a battery inside, and when it runs out, essentially it won't work anymore. So and it's basically tied to the ROMs on the board. So what you need to do is you'll have to replace it with a regular 68000 CPU, and you'll have to swap the ROMs with a custom ROMs that aren't tied to a particular CPU, and that's how you basically fix that issue. So a lot of these boards you can find that aren't working is just because the battery's died on the CPU. This one's actually a bit of an interesting one, and if you do find one of these, this is a good one to get. Sometimes they didn't use the battery CPU. For example, this one, it's got a regular 68000 in there, but they've got a sort of custom security chip here, and basically that's what ties this to the ROM board, so that means you can't swap the ROM board. But luckily there's no battery, so basically it's not a ticking time bomb. So with this you don't have to worry about that, and you can of course swap the ROMs and take out the chip and get around it that way as well, but there's no ticking time bomb on this one. So it's a nice original Altered Beast board, no modifications at all, works great, and yeah, this is probably one of my favorites. Okay, so the next two are both pretty much the same. These are Prisoners of War by SNK. I really like this game, a lot of people don't. It can be a bit, it can get a bit tiresome, a bit boring after a couple of hours. It's a bit repetitive, but for 1 to 2 hours it's good fun, and it's basically just a beat 'em up. And it's pretty good. Prisoners of War is good. There's two of them here. That's because this is the first one I got, and it's the Japanese version. And there was actually two variants of the Prisoners of War PCB. a Model 1 and a Model 2 basically, or two different revisions. And the English one I've got down here is a revision 1, the Japanese is a revision 2, and I thought I'd get both revisions and both different versions, because why not? And this is the Japanese Prisoners of War. This is the revision 2 of the board. Basically, I won't show you revision 1, but revision 1 is basically the same as this, but it's got a daughter board on top on this section. And apparently that daughter board can cause a lot of problems, so I think they switched to this revision that just gets rid of that. But yeah, this is the Japanese version. And yeah, good game. Great soundtrack. And this one came out in 1988, I believe. So yeah, Prisoners of War. So this is another example of a Sega System 16 board. This is Golden Axe. It's a little bit in rough shape, especially on the ROM board. I think this has been sitting around somewhere for a long time. I got this one, unfortunately it doesn't work, but I plan to fix it. But I got this one for £25, so very cheap. Of course, solder's non-working. And it was a real pain to get, though. The seller was very unresponsive and took him a long time to ship it out, but it was worth it for 25 quid. And the ROM board does work. I have tried it in another Sega System 16 board, so I have been playing a lot of Golden Axe. But this is actually a original Golden Axe PCB. Because I believe in some of the Golden Axe boards, they just used a different Sega System 16 game that basically wasn't doing very well, and just converted them to Golden Axes. But this is an original Golden Axe board, like original motherboard as well. So yeah, very cool. And this one came with the battery Hitachi 68000 I was talking about. So I put a regular one in there, and I changed the ROMs there, and yeah, it still isn't working, but it works more. The CPU is definitely an issue, because I was getting nothing before, and now it does come up, but it's got some graphical issues, so I'm hoping it's not the graphics chip. I think it's that one there. I hope it's not that one. Or actually, maybe the graphics chip is underneath the ROM board. But hopefully it's not that, and it's just some RAM or something, and I can get that fixed. But either way, 25 quid, it's not too bad. And the last board I've got is another Sega System 16 game, Alien Syndrome. So this is Alien Syndrome. Now I got this one pre-modified, so someone else already modified it and put Alien Syndrome on there, because it's originally, I believe it was a Tetris. Somewhere it says Tetris. Oh, it says Tetris at the bottom in Japanese. You can't really see it. Also, he did recap this now. Preferably I'd want to do that myself, and it wasn't the best job ever, but it's something he did, and it was tested working, so I bought it. And I really wanted to play Alien Syndrome, and I finally did when I got this, and it's absolutely amazing. Love it. Great game. And this is the revision 1 of the Sega System 16, because it's got the different sort of custom chips, different looking chips there. And unfortunately this one recently has developed a fault. I actually took off the Alien Syndrome. I was playing Golden Axe. I've been playing it for a long time on this board. And recently I decided to play a bit of Golden Axe, and I have no sound, unfortunately. So the audio seems to have died. So I've got no audio from it, which is not too bad. That, to be honest, having no audio is probably the best sort of fault that can happen. It's definitely a fixable fault, not like a graphical fault where it could be a custom chip. So no audio is not too bad, definitely fixable. but a bit of a shame that's happened. And but yeah, that is my Alien Syndrome, and that is it for my arcade boards. So hopefully you guys, if you're getting into this, learned something new, or hopefully you at least enjoyed it. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments. I'll try and answer them. And yeah, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Take care.